And welcome everybody to the PCS Like a Pro show. I'm your host, Megan Harless, as always, and we have a really great show today. We're going to be talking about air tags. If you've seen some of the recent stories between Good Morning America and Army Times, Military Times, you know exactly what we're talking about. So we're not going to do any big updates today because I want us to be able to have the time to talk about this topic and have a good discussion about it. I do want to say, because I know we have strong opinions on both sides between the military family side of it and the industry side of it. So I only ask that any comments today, let's please keep them civil. This is designed to be a discussion to help us learn and understand each other's perspectives from both sides of it so we can be able to move forward together to help improve this process and experience together for everyone. So with that said, we're just going to get started with all of this today. So we've got Valerie with us and we've got Dan Bradley from IAM with us. So welcome, both of you. I'm very excited for today and thankful that you both took time out of your day to join us here. And so Valerie, if we could start with you, just give us a little introduction of a little bit about yourself.
Sure thing. My name is Valerie Mcnulty. My husband and I have been a part of my husband's been in the Army for 14 years. I've been a part of the Army lifestyle for 12. We have done 4 PCS moves, 2 Diddy and 2 partial. This was honestly our first experience having any big issues with the PCS system as a whole. But yeah, I have 2 little boys that keep me on my toes.
Perfect. And for you, Dan, can you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about what it is that you do?
Absolutely. So Dan Bradley, International Association of Movers, and for them, I am the Director of Government and Military Relations, and been doing that for about 3.5 years here with IAM. Prior to that, I was in the military for 20 years, a transportation and logistics officer in the military, did 3 years in the Defense Personal Property Program as the director of that program. And I've done some 8 years as a Department of the Army civilian as well on the freight and transportation side, just freight, not household goods specifically on that. And you know, IAM is an association of movers, moving companies, suppliers, people in the moving industry. We're worldwide. We have a couple thousand company members across the globe and in the United States as well. And you know, we are all about moving in terms of whether that be government, DoD, or commercial, residential, you know, corporate moving. So it runs the gamut.
Oh, perfect. So like I said, we're just going to dive right into today because I know we're going to have some good conversation discussions going. So Valerie, if we can start with you, can you tell us some about your story of what happened with your most recent PCS and using the air tags?
Sure thing. Honestly, our PCS started out great. It started out like any normal PCS. It actually didn't start going a little haywire until the beginning of January. We had already surpassed our date for delivery, and so we were into the claim process. I can't remember the name of it currently off the top of my head.
Inconvenience claim.
Inconvenience claim. Thank you. So we were into that, and our moving coordinator contacted us and tried to speed the process along. And so she had told us that our items were going to be delivered the following day. So at that point, that's when I decided to check our AirTag location just to see, just kind of fact check and see like where they were. And it turns out they were 4 hours away. And so, you know, my husband and I kind of celebrated. We're like, sweet, we're going to get our stuff tomorrow. Then about an hour later, we get a call from the driver, and that's when things kind of started going downhill. He claimed that he had only just picked them up in Colorado Springs. And so when I tried to, you know, let him know like, hey, we see that our stuff is only 4 hours away, we got hung up on. And he then called back probably 10 minutes later trying to bargain with us and saying like, oh, well, you know, I'm still a while away. I could probably get the stuff to you Sunday or Monday. Mind you, this was a weekend, so I guess that's not a normal thing for delivery times. And so we were like, listen, like, I don't know where the miscommunication is. You'll probably have to talk to our coordinator and see like, you know, what's going on here. We're just being told that our delivery is supposed to happen tomorrow. And so we then hung up again. And we get a call probably another hour later. And essentially he said that he was going to New Jersey to see his lady and that he could get it to us by tomorrow, but he would have to hustle. And so from there, we contacted our moving coordinator and had just a million questions as to, how this could happen, if this is okay to happen, all kinds of things. And they were doing the best they could to answer them, but they were kind of the middleman in the sense as well, from what we gathered. And it turned out to where I had more information about our driver than they did. And so, we were all kind of in the dark, except for my one AirTag.
So at what point during this process did you decide, hey, we have an AirTag in the shipment, let's go ahead and check and see where it's pinging at?
So I had an AirTag turned into a bracelet for my 4-year-old son. That's what he would wear to school because this was his first year riding the bus. So that was accidental in the sense that it ended up in his toy box when we were prepping to move and organizing. And I came across it and I was like, you know what? We don't need it for this move. I might as well leave it in here. And my husband was like, yeah, that way we can see our stuff. That'll be great. And so again, I didn't check it until our moving coordinator let us know, hey, your things are going to be delivered the following day. And so at that point, that's when things started going downhill.
So without having that AirTag in your shipment, you wouldn't have known where your shipment was. What essentially would you have done, or what would have happened without knowing where your shipment was with that AirTag?
I mean, we obviously would have been waiting longer, which, that's fine. But, there's a lot of gray area. Our driver, he was driving a rental enterprise truck. So it wasn't even a truck that could be tracked. He was the only one that had the, any of our items. We didn't know what we were receiving. He turned it into an overflow situation. And no one was tracking what was on his truck except for him. So there's a lot of gray area in that sense. He has a lot of freedom with our items.
Yeah. So I know we've got a lot of folks watching right now. So I would love to hear thoughts from both the military, family, industry side. If you guys could drop them in the comments about the use of AirTags. And we'll go to you, Dan. So when this situation was brought to the industry's attention, that what happened with Valerie and her shipment, what was the reaction and the thoughts of the industry?
Yeah, so I guess I'd first say, kind of like any broad audience, right? It was probably varied, as you might imagine. It's hard to get a consensus of any single group, and I think I've heard some of those varied kind of thoughts on it. I'd say in the first couple of days, though, to some people, it was kind of like, oh, geez, here we go again, right? Here comes the social media blitz, the news blitz on something that's going on in the industry. And, generically not specific to the tags of, are we going to take a black eye over kind of one situation here? And I'm not saying that it's the only situation, but vast majority of shipments, I think, don't deal with these kind of shipments. So I think that was, kind of it, what's the backlash going to be? And so people kind of absorb that, and that's all connected to their thoughts on, use of AirTags, not using AirTags. Should it be allowed? Shouldn't it be allowed? I think it's kind of transitioned a little bit over time for people as they thought through it on the moving side. And again, I can't speak for everybody. These are kind of the conversations I've had when you start talking about, what this is, what it can be. I think there's some themes that came out of the conversations that I had, both with, individual one-on-one conversations with moving groups that I was talking to at the time. Just so happened to be in California talking to a couple of moving groups with California Moving and Storage Association when this kind of rolled out. And then IM has volunteer members of moving companies who are on committees for us, and they've gotten together and had conversations about this. So I think there's a couple of themes. I think, the biggest one was that people say to me all the time is, geez, we're here because of just kind of, not being transparent to the customer and the customer, in this case, Valerie specifically, right? So shipment location is really kind of a simple answer for a driver or move court or anybody to kind of give to the industry. And so what everybody keeps saying is, man, just be truthful about this, right? Just be truthful about it. That's our expectation as a company. Again, these are things people have said to me on the moving side. That's our expectation of our employees. That's our expectation of the company. Be truthful. And then, we'll just go from there and we'll try and sort through it as time goes by. So I think that's kind of one reaction just in general on that. And again, I would say not to excuse this particular situation, and I'm not, but a driver's life can be a pretty rough one in the household goods world. Those drivers are people who are like the face of that moving company. And again, from a mover or from a customer's perspective, hard to understand. And I know this, who's the transportation service provider who's responsible for my shipment? There's another company showing up who's the local agent who's trying to have, who's engaged with me as well. Like, who are all these different people? Is the driver even connected to that company? So that driver is a customer service representative. There's somebody trying to lead a packing crew. There's somebody trying to make sure your stuff gets loaded in their truck safely. There's somebody who on many shipments are balancing multiple shipments and their deliveries, not just one shipment in their truck a lot of times. They have hours of service from a federal regulation perspective they got to manage. So, and somewhere along the line there, they're trying to have a personal life too. So it's a rough thing, but what I would tell you is that the people who do it well, who love to do it, who get it in their blood, they can be the absolute difference to your move and having a good move. So, again, I think most people's thoughts on this topic is, by the vast majority of those drivers are hardworking and honest, and this kind of a, like I say, it was a little bit of a gut punch. Kind of the industry's been in the social media a bit over the last few years, and some of that doesn't always turn out to be the way the story starts when it goes down with social media. Go figure, right? Social media, and so that was that's been a theme that I've heard. But really, I think to these specifically, kind of, I think the overriding thing that people have said is, in some of the meetings and conversations I've had, is, hey, these tags are out there, right? It's not new. It's not ubiquitous, right? There's not a lot of it happening, but it's certainly been out there. I've talked to people who said, hey, we were aware last year that people put some of these tags on our shipments, and okay, so that's, so let them do it. Not that big of a deal. I think the big thing becomes customer education on this, right? What does it really mean if I have a tag in my shipment? And how do I think what people would prefer on the moving side is for people to just say to them, hey, I've got this tag, it's in my shipment, and let's work together. Let's be transparent on both sides, right? Transparency and the lack of is how we got into this conversation, because, a driver wasn't transparent with all the details and being honest on the shipment on that. And I think on a moving side, in terms of the air tags, most moving companies and representatives, drivers, I think, would appreciate the fact that if a customer was transparent and said, hey, I have one of these tags in my shipment, just so you know. And then again, how do we then build a way for a win-win situation? So it's helpful to the moving customer, it's helpful to the moving, the coordinator and the driver and everybody involved. So I think that's, kind of where this is on that. I think I grew up in the 70s and 80s, and there was a guy named Cy Sims, right, on TV, who had a clothing company, and he would always say, an educated consumer is our best customer. And I think that's the important piece of all this is, if you're going to throw an air tag in a shipment, does it make sense to you if you don't tell anybody and you start asking a bunch of questions because, hey, why is the truck going in the opposite direction on my home? Or, hey, how come this truck is sat for 2 or 3 days and not moved anywhere? And you have to understand the kind of irregular route nature of the moving industry and what that driver's trying to do. And I think if that education's not out there, then that's where it could lead to a lot of other questions. So again, I think, there was some initial consternation, frustration on the topic. I think generally speaking, people have transitioned to, how do we take advantage of this? This could be exciting for a lot of different reasons. How do we support it where it's going to be used? And, that's generally, I would say, what I've heard about it.
Sorry, I had to take me off mute there. Yeah, you made a lot of good points about some stuff, Dan. We got a lot of good questions and comments going. We're going to get to some of those questions here in a minute, but I wanted to ask you this question first, Dan, to kind of lead into some of those questions that are getting asked in the comments. A big part of the PCS process for families is the amount of hands that are involved in the process, from the local agents on each end, the TSP, sometimes there's storage, the driver, and all the communication pieces that go with it. So how do you see, like in this situation, using an air tag to help bridge some of that, those common pain points for families and that communication piece of it to know where the shipment is?
Yeah, there's certainly potential there, right? I mean, Valerie's a case in point on that. There's potential there to make customers comfortable, with answering the question of where's my stuff on their own, in some respects, without kind of having to dial up somebody, email somebody, text somebody in the moving industry and find that answer. So, but I would say it's a double-edged sword, right? So in some ways it can be useful in that perspective and could maybe take some pressure off of some of that, constant, hey, do you know if it's here? Do you know if it's there? Do you know why it's, but you got to understand, like I said, the nature of that movement as well. So it's kind of already a many layered process, the moving industry, right? So if it leads to more questions, more emails, more interaction in an already kind of over stressed environment, especially in the peak season, the summer peak season for all these moving companies, then that's the double-edged portion of the sword. That's where it could be not as helpful in that situation, because it could cause, frankly, a lot of extra work in that situation. And I think, I would say the vast majority, right? The vast majority of shipments, and now I'm talking DoD shipments. And when we're talking DoD shipments, you're talking over last year, over 300,000 pickups for the military, right? So in the vast majority, more information about where your shipment is doesn't necessarily lead to more control over getting my shipment. And again, a year from now, if you did this story and you look back and could you find other stories like Valerie's, I think you probably could, right? Because it's those types of situations will happen. But even if you found 100 of them or 200 of them or 1,000 of them or 3,000 of them, that's still less than 1% of all the shipments that the DoD moves in a year. So that's where I would say the vast majority, it doesn't just lead to helping to control like when I get my shipment, because most of it's going to move the way it's going to move regardless of that. And there's just so little things that people can do to impact that. But again, to the extent that it can make a customer comfortable and, give them their own sense that, hey, I know where my shipment is and I can maybe help do some planning on that perspective in terms of where it is and where it's going to be and when I can get it, then there's certainly some potential there.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think a good piece that you mentioned in there is about the whole logistics part of it. It's something that Jake Peroni in the comments also mentions that, the trackers give us a location, but there's a lot more logistics that go into getting a shipment from A to B. Before we get to our next question, I wanted to come back here. There was let me find it real quick, question in the comments I wanted to ask you about Valerie. From Stephen Meyer, and he asked, was Valerie stand on direct communication with the driver? I know we've had some discussions about where, people are saying the drivers should not be communicating with the customer. It should be going through their move coordinator. Other people say that driver should absolutely have direct communication. Where do you stand on that line with having direct communication with the driver?
We were frankly surprised that we had direct communication. We weren't expecting this call. So, we had just picked up the phone call. We didn't know who it was, and it turns out it was our driver. And so that's when things started kind of messing up, so to speak. I don't think that we would have questioned it had our items been delayed until Monday, had we not gotten a phone call from the driver and I had checked my AirTag. So yeah, I think it was an honesty situation. Yeah, I don't know if I agree with the driver calling us.
Yeah, I think that's I don't know. That's kind of a tough situation, and I can see both sides of it. Being able to have the driver contact you and being able to have that direct communication of knowing exactly when your shipment may show up or knowing exactly when they're going to come load. But at the same time, on our side of the table, we're always told all communication should be through your move coordinator as your single point of contact. And so when we start getting all these other folks calling us, then when there's an issue, it's okay, which number do I call back to get the help for this situation? So it makes, again, that communication piece just a lot more difficult in there. There's a lot of questions here, and I'll ask this to you, Dan, asking about having real-time tracking now for household goods. Can we have a barcode that gets scanned kind of like, UPS and the Postal Service? So do you think that using the AirTags and other tracking devices are going to lead to the moving industry at some point having that real-time tracking piece?
I would say there's potential there. I think it's, things have to get cheaper, more prevalent, more ubiquitous, things like that, so that you can have, and people have put some of that in the chat about there's more to just location, right? It's kind of, there's a whole bunch of details associated with the location that becomes, something that you have to play with as well. And I saw a comment in the chat that said, why aren't these all tracked with GPS? Wouldn't that be great? And really, again, I'll go back to 300,000 shipments, right? Magnitudes of order greater than any other shipper in the world as far as the amount of shipments that somebody's doing. And right now, I mean, that's really a broad logistics tail there. And so if you say, hey, I have a requirement, I want everybody to do this, and I'm the DoD and I want that requirement, that shows up in the form of cost to the government. And are people really prepared for that? And that's why I would say probably requires these to become cheaper and easier to use. But there are certainly things out there. I've told some people this before. I ran when I was a civilian, one of the DoD's tracking services for trucks moving across the United States and into Canada and up to Alaska for weapons and missiles and classified and things like that. And we satellite track those trucks. And, people would say, well, why can't my normal freight that's going from base A to base B, get that same level of tracking? And we would say, you can, right? Just have your transportation officer put it in our system. But guess what? You're going to pay for, that tracking. You're going to pay for the driver's capability in that. You're going to pay for the satellite for that. And then everybody would back off and not use that capability, right? Because it's expensive capability. And again, this doesn't have to be, and you can say, okay, $25 air tag, I threw it at my shipment. But if it became 300,000 shipments worth of that, right? That's just on a $25 air tag. We're talking somebody's got to recover $7-8 million on that investment. But you also have to have people buying it. You have to have people manage it. You have to have people worrying about getting it returned. You got to have people, going through the process of linking that to the customer and the customer understanding where it is. So there's a whole tail that goes with that. And so, yeah, I think, to the extent that some of these kind of technologies can be used, they will be used. I think it'll be for a little while more niche, if I'm a corporate client and I'm going to move 200 people in the next year, I might say to a moving company, because I have one moving company or two that I'm dealing with, hey, I want one of these tags put in my shipments. Okay, that's probably manageable, right? Because I'm going to charge that company for that tag and the management of that tag and those kind of things. And I put it into my bid and my quote that I get to that company. If I say, as a DoD, I want 300,000 of these shipments tracked this way, it's a whole magnitude, order of magnitude, more complex to get after that. So will somebody take it on themselves? I think probably. I've seen movers who are in the DoD program that have showed me like, hey, we use electronic inventories. We just put this in our system. We put it on the truck and we send the customer a link via text and it shows where the truck is, right? So people are using certain types of that right now. But again, it takes investment, it takes money, it takes a return on that investment. And so little by little, it'll eke its way into the process more and more and more, I think. It'll just take some time. And again, the DoD being so big is the outlier, I think, and all that.
Yeah, so I'm going to bring this question up real quick because it kind of goes in with the whole, industry tracking piece. Do you think that there would be, where did it go? Right here. So it's going to show up as Facebook user because they are commenting from the private PCS group. This is from Jen. Wants to know, what if there's an option for military families to be able to pay a fee that covers some sort of tracking service? Would that be something that could essentially be feasible, or is it still, I don't know, part of a logistical piece of getting the industry on board on the same sort of tracking system? Yeah,
again, I think as things become, I can use it on any device, right? Do I have an Android? Do I have an Apple phone, an iPhone? Is the tag an Apple tag related, or is it, can they be used across multiple systems? Is that easy to do? How do I manage that? How do I make sure that the company that I got assigned to in a move is prepared to do that? To the extent that those things get simpler and simpler, easier to use, there might be some capability to do that. And again, to that extent, right now, just like Valerie's case, I guess you could throw a chip in there and track it that way. Anyway, you wouldn't have to pay an extra fee to the moving company to do that. It's just, again, what does it get you, right? You got to make sure it's giving you, to Valerie's situation, if there wasn't an iPhone nearby, right, or a way to pick up that signal, you wouldn't have got that signal anyway, right? So then, and I'm not the smartest guy on AirTags, but I would think it requires you could pay for something like that, and all of a sudden, why isn't it working? How come I'm not getting a signal? What happened to my signal? Those kind of things. So, and maybe Valerie can speak to that too. I don't really know how the whole thing specifically works on that AirTag.
So my understanding with the AirTags is you have to use like the Find My Friends or Find My iPhone type of app. And then like if somebody has that on their phone, then they walk by, it kind of pings off of that network. So if you have an iPhone, you walk by, it's going to ping the AirTag. Now, I know they've made some updates to where like if an AirTag is moving with you and you have an iPhone and you have that app turned on, that sometimes you'll get the notification that, you have an AirTag traveling with you. And that was one of the big things with AirTags, I think a month or so ago, where people and the police were talking about how they were tracking like cars. People were finding them on their cars type of deal. But there's a way to be able to disable that, so that way it's no longer pinging off of your phone. I want to throw up a question here. You're going to love this, Dan. It's from your boss.
Great.
So from Chuck White, that we all know. So should Transcom be communicating on the standardization of policy regarding the use of AirTags? Do you think that there will be some sort of regulation at some point, either families can't use the AirTags or that we have to disclose that there's an AirTag or some sort of GPS device in our shipment, or somewhere in between at any point?
So they've signaled to us really that they're hands off on this topic right now. That they aren't going to take a proactive stance on it. It's kind of the messaging that they've used with us. What I would say is, again, broad use requires policy, requires a context. It requires people to understand what they're getting and what they aren't getting. All those kind of things. So I think that could be important someday. Right now, because there is no requirement for use. What I would say is more than policy, between, efforts like this through spouse groups, between the service headquarters, between a counselor, at an installation, between the industry. And then to me, I throw in Transcom there as well. If these things are going to happen, if these things are going to be out there, people need to, talk to service members about what it is, what's happening, what they can and can't expect, and those kind of things, right? So I think there needs to be some strategic communication from all fronts on it, on the topic, to let service members know what they are or aren't getting, and what it means when they use this type of technology. So I think the first step is communication, because it's not being mandated, and then if it ever did become more mandated, then certainly the idea of policy, procedure, regulation, requirements, all those kind of things would have to come to play.
Yeah, that makes sense. So, Valerie, now having been through this process and the use of your AirTag, what changes do you hope would come to the PCS process after going through the situation you did?
I'm sorry, what was that?
That having been through the change, been through the experience that you've been through now with using the AirTag, what changes do you hope would come to the PCS process?
Honestly, I hope that there's more like advocates in the process. I hope that as a military family, we have someone that can kind of get us from point A to point B that we can fall on. And if like situations like mine arise, we did try and reach out in various avenues to help with or just to reach out for help, and that did not go in our favor. I also hope that that even if the AirTag is not the answer, I hope that tracking of some sort can come about in a different way. I hope that we can advance, because there's no sense that us as military families, like we could order a pizza today and watch it from the time we order it all the way to delivery and know the process and the end result. And the fact that our entire livelihood is packed up in a trailer and we can't do that, and we're still, you know, dealing with carbon copy papers. I feel like there has to be a better way and a better answer. So
yeah, that some of that sounds similar to what I had said back in 2018 when we all remember the open letter petition that took off and went viral and started my advocacy stuff, where I asked about that transparency piece, being able to see where our shipment is in that tracking piece. And I even, at one point, I think it was you, Dan, and it might have been John Becker at the time, where I even brought up the whole pizza thing. You know, that Papa John's can tell me exactly where my pizza is in the process. Why can't I know where my household goods are between Virginia and California? You know, I think this air tags, the use of air tags, and there's smart tags and tiles, and, you know, it's not just air tags. There's many different GPS trackers out there now that, you know, it's kind of helped solving that issue that military families have of that transparency, that we want to know where our shipments are. We want to be able to know where our things are. We want to be able to know, if I can't get a hold of my move coordinator, that at least my stuff is not sitting at the origin warehouse. It's at least making progress through its journey to where we're at. I'm not going to read the whole comment because it's kind of lengthy, but where'd it go? Back up here from Jake again, talking about that air tags could be a great tool to provide reassurance, especially on the international side. I know many of our families going on Oconus moves have talked about wanting to put an air tag into each crate, because we know those stories happen of where, you know, 6 of the 7 crates show up and nobody knows where that 7th crate is. So can an air tag at least help be able to tell that it's at a port in California versus is it at a port lost somewhere in Japan? You know, so I think it's definitely going to be something that we're going to be discussing for a while and working through and trying to figure out. So for you, Dan, like, we know, and as we see here in the comments, the industry has a lot of chatter going on about the air tags. In general, what is the consensus on families using them? Are they okay with it as long as we disclose it, or are they completely against it and don't want to have any piece of that? Where are they kind of falling on the line right now?
Yeah, and again, I think consensus is a tough word, and you can probably see some of that in the chat right there. But in the groups I've talked on this with the people I've talked about it, you know, it's a, hey, let's find a way, right, to take advantage of this. Let's find a way to, you know, to add this capability if the service member wants that, right? If they want to throw that tag in there, let's all try and create a win-win situation for everybody involved. Be transparent about it, so that, you know, again, moving companies need to be transparent with customers and honest on those things. And they would hope that, I think that the customers would be the same. So I think that's where they are. I think there's, like I say, over time, it's the conversation on it's transitioning a little bit. It's out there, you know, it's happened already. It's going to happen again. And so how do you do something to take care of the customer, to make the move better for the customer? And how can we use what are these and this won't be the last type of capability that'll come up, right? There'll be others that come around. So how do you do that? I saw somebody in the chat apparently thought I implied that these types of things were out there so that there wasn't any additional cost to the TSP. And I don't think that's what I said, frankly. I think my point was, if somebody was going to do this from a corporate client side or whatever, they knew they'd be paying for the tags. That client would be paying for the management of those tags. That client would have to pay for it, right? So there's a cost involved here to the TSP if it becomes mandated, right? The way that Valerie used it, some others used it, that's not necessarily a cost to the TSP. That's using some technology that's out there and taking advantage of it. In a broad use, to me, 300,000 shipments, 50,000 shipments, whatever the big number is, it's a little bit of the wrong tool for the job, I would say, to some extent, because it only gives you a certain amount of information. It doesn't provide policy. It doesn't provide the context. It doesn't provide, you know, when it's required, all those things. But again, to your point, Megan, you know, different crates being in different areas and not making, you know, the trip and being separated, all those things are useful for the customer to kind of understand where their stuff is. And frankly, could be useful to the TSP to identify that when you call and say, yep, we got one box that was not added, and we're going to get that expedited and moving. So there's capabilities out there. I think people see the potential in it on the moving side, and we just got to get smarter on it and figure out the best way to make it successful for the customer and useful for the mover.
Yeah, no, absolutely. There's a lot of comments, especially from our military family side of things right now, saying how they all want tracking of some sort of fashion, whether it's with barcode stickers, GPS trackers, scanning things to a warehouse, with our mail, we get packages, we get to see when things are scanned, when they arrive at a distribution center, and then when they leave. And so I think that at a minimum would be something that could definitely help make at least the military side feel a little bit more comfortable in knowing where our things are. Question I want to ask you, Dan, and I've said it on several different threads and several different forums. A lot of it is transparency and honesty and that communication piece of things. Do you think that using these GPS trackers, these air tags that military families are going to be utilizing more and more as we move through the season, do you think that they're going to help keep that communication and those drivers honest, or is it just going to be a game that we're going to be playing as to, are people being tracked or not tracked?
So what I would say is, I think, and again, maybe the customers who are interested in this conversation, who are frustrated with military moves, would disagree with me. I think the vast majority of drivers, vast majority of crewmen are honest people, right? So does that air tag make somebody who's honest more honest? I don't know. Can you solve or help resolve situations like Valerie dealt with if somebody wants to be, not honest, less than transparent on that? Sure, that certainly would help it. But I think the message I hear from moving companies is, hey, we want our employees to be honest. We want them to be transparent with the customer, and that's our expectation. And that's I think the vast majority of what you see. And again, not to make excuses for when things go bad. I think for the most part, moving companies want 100% of the customer base to be satisfied with their move. Absolutely. And I think, and this is something I think that gets lost too. There's a lot of people who were formerly in the military who are in the moving industry, right? They were in the military, or their parents were in the military and they're a brat. Their grandfather was in the military, their brother, their sister, their uncle, they're in the military, and they're a part of this process. And it's not an easy process. It's not an easy process when you're moving as a military member. It's not an easy process to be on the other side of that phone either, on the moving side, for a lot of reasons. And, they're proud to be a part of supporting the military in that. So, again, I don't know if I would want to characterize it as will the tag make people more honest. I think it can help situations out in that environment. I think there are people who are trying to do a great job every day. And on that, Megan, if I can go back to one of your previous points, and I'm an old guy, so I'm starting to fly out of my brain right now as I say that, what I want to say. The reason that UPS or FedEx or somebody can track that is because people pay premium for that service, right? So to the extent that the DoD wants to pay premium to track a shipment across the country, across the globe, wants to set up the process to do that, wants to add the manpower to do that, those things happen when people force their hands on that, but it doesn't happen for free. It doesn't happen in FedEx for free. It doesn't happen in UPS for free. It doesn't happen in US Mail for free, right? Those requirements aren't right now in the program, beyond what, you guys are aware of what the requirements are for. I call my move coordinator and they have so many hours to give me a location of where my stuff is. And that's pretty manual because the investment hasn't been there right now to do that in a more technologically advanced way. And the requirement's not out there for that because it's a, $2.2 billion process right now as it exists. And is the DoD willing to kind of go higher and spend more money on those types of improvements and making sure they can implement such a broad change to a program?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I'm just going to throw this up here real quick. That Tim says, 80% of the people do the right thing. 10% will do it if they think they're being supervised, and 10% will always do the wrong thing. Definitely a good, interesting take on that. But again, you've heard it a lot here today for the industry folks watching. It's a lot of it's transparency. A lot of it is honesty and communication, and how all of those things kind of go together in helping a family get from point A to point B, knowing that our entire lives and everything we have and that means something to us is on the back of your truck, and wanting to ensure that it's getting to where it's supposed to go. Yeah, anything, we're going to be wrapping it up here soon, pending any other questions that we get through the comments. So Valerie, is there anything that you wanted to touch on or cover or say that we haven't already?
I mean, just to piggyback, Dan, on what you just said, I think if it were an option, I would be willing to pay extra to track my HHG. I think that there would be a lot of military families that would be willing to pay a little extra just to have that peace of mind and, you know, be able to say, hey, our stuff was here and now it's here and it's all in one place, and we know that none of it got stolen. I'm just throwing that out there.
Yeah, I mean, and again, I agree with you that I think there would be plenty of people, right, who want to pay that extra bit. I think there'd be others, right? There'd be a haves and haves not situation. There'd be others who would say, I can't pay for that, or I'm not willing to pay for that, but why don't I get this tracking when Valerie and her family does? But you know, that's not a program decision on the moving side, frankly. Really, it's kind of much more associated with the DoD and policy. But and again, that because the mover can't charge you something right now under the current program rules. You know, we couldn't say, hey, we'll do this for you. Give us an extra $20 and we'll make that happen. You know, give us $100, we'll make that happen. So those are things that would have to come up the DoD side. But again, then, you know, you'd have to have companies that said, you know, here's my list of companies, and these people have all raised their hand and said, yep, we'd be able to provide that capability, you know, if you ask for it, kind of thing. And so that's where maybe that's how it starts, though, right? These types of conversations, these types of issues, raising the issue and the concern, getting people thinking about it, you know, leads to the next step, I think, a lot of times in you know, what happens down the road with how this might be managed in the future, or what other capabilities are going to be, or somebody coming up with even a simpler solution, right, than we're thinking about right now.
Yeah, definitely. So really quick, Timothy asking about, will this be recorded and reposted? It will be on LinkedIn, and it will also be on my Facebook page, facebook.com/PCS like a pro. It'll be there as a replay. So you'll be able to go back and rewatch it and share it as well. And then down here, so Fred, who's a driver, throwing the air tag into the parts box. It is a big thing on the military side. The big joke of the parts box is always goes missing or always gets misplaced at the home, because crews just want to get out of there. They don't want to have to reassemble and put a bunch of stuff together. You know, so putting the air tag in a parts box, you're never going to lose your parts box. Definitely an idea there for that. But you know, definitely, this is definitely going to be a conversation that's going to be continuing over the next several months as we get into PCS season, as we see things shape and take place, you know, and a conversation that's going to be continuing, especially with the industry, I know, and with Transcon and probably other military families. And again, the big thing I hope that the industry can at least take away from this today is that it's transparency, it's honesty, and it's communication that really make the difference for a military family when it comes to our PCS and knowing how well our PCS is going to go. So I wanted to thank Valerie and Dan for taking time out of their busy days to join us today and to be able to help discuss this more. I hope everybody has something they can take away that they've learned from the other side, have a little more perspective on things. And we'd love to be able to continue this conversation as we get closer to peak season. I'm sure we'll have Dan and probably Chuck on here again at some point to talk about what to expect this peak season. And again, if anybody is ever interested in wanting to be a guest on here and come and share your side of the story, share what, you know, tidbits you want the other side to know, I'm always happy to have other military families and industry members on. You know, as I say all the time, the more that we can have these conversations and talk together and be able to understand each other's perspective, the more that we can be able to work together to improve this process and to improve the experience for all of those that are involved. So thank you both for joining us today. Thank you everybody else for tuning in, watching, commenting, and chiming in. Definitely great conversation today. Join us again next week. Next Wednesday, we'll be back at our regular time at 10 a.m. Central, same place that you found the show today on LinkedIn and on Facebook. Until then, we hope you all enjoy the rest of your day and the rest of your week. And if you are in the path of the snowstorm coming in, hopefully you don't have to travel anywhere tomorrow or even Friday. Stay safe, stay warm, and fingers crossed that there are no power outages happening. So we will see you all next week. Bye.
Thanks, Megan.
Thank you.